Josiah and Andy, super happy to have you here. Sprocket Games is definitely a very cool favorite customer, and one of the things that I think we're struggling in the game industry, in tech and elsewhere, is getting estimates that are accurate. Sometimes we're good at doing estimates that are very specific, but they might not be very accurate. And the answer to that is being more kind of flow-based, more throughput-based metrics, and I think you're doing this really well. But I hand over to you, Josiah, from a CEO point of view, why is this important for you, and how it's been going so far?
Yeah, especially in a small studio, there are really hard deadlines that are unmovable. Like deadlines like major industry conferences like DICE and GDC, where that's where you go to meet publishers and investors, and you can't move those dates because they're conferences. And so being able to predict exactly what the build's going to look like and how polished it's going to be and those sorts of things is more and more valuable the better fidelity you can get. And so that's why we do these things.
Fantastic. And Andy, would love to see a little bit how you do this in practice, both in Favro and with some of the magic I also know that you do with more sophisticated calculations.
Absolutely, yeah. So what I do in Favro is I'm trying to we have a Kanban, right? It's fairly standard in terms of, there's some backlog rows, there's some doing rows, there's a done row. This will vary by depending on each studio's Kanban, but it is just move the cards across the column. And the idea is what I'm trying to measure using the cumulative flow chart is what is the state. Like I will take snapshots of what is the state of how many cards do I have in each column at the beginning and end of the sprints. And so for us specifically, we have I found it useful to split out committed work, which are tasks, and emergent work, which are bugs. But really, the important part is I'm using the cumulative flow diagram to determine like what is the state. So at the beginning of at sort of beginning and end of opening and closing the sprint, I'll take a look at how many cards are in each column. And then, when I'm done, archive it so you can see that this is all the dones get archived out. And I take that velocity data, that's basically the throughput data, and I just put it in a spreadsheet. I basically try to track from my backlog columns how much work we're going to start the sprint with, and then I measure. Since I was trying to get us better at getting all the work into the done column, but we would have some work in the game director review column. So I sort of use those two columns as a proxy for what I consider to be done. So this is your basic velocity data of every sprint, which we use 2-week sprints. How many cards are going through the system? And I take this velocity data, and using a free spreadsheet for Monte Carlo forecasting from Focused Objective here, I take the data and put it into the Monte Carlo forecaster. These are the actual card completion velocities that you put into the sheet, and it can tell you basically from the different tuning of the spreadsheet, if you have a certain number of cards left, what the probability is, what date you'll likely be done. You can also run in any direction. This is like a different tool on the same spreadsheet where you can say if you have 3 time periods, given your historical data, how many cards are you going to move through given that time period. And so using that forecasting data, you can say if you have a specific amount of work you have to get done, how much work, when is it going to land, which can then get you into your scope conversations about this is not going to fit, so what are we going to do instead about that. And the other direction might be we have 6 weeks and we want to pick the amount of work left. The amount of work that will fit is that amount. So let's look through and prioritize our backlog and pick the most important work until we fill up the bucket that the spreadsheet says.
This is awesome. And if I'm not mistaken from this, you're really looking at how many cards you're completing. You're actually not using story points or any other type of estimate like that.
Yes. I have run these kind of forecasting systems using both card counts as well as story point estimates. They both work. The forecaster doesn't care whether it's a card count or like the throughput number is a throughput number. But in the case for Sprocket, I wanted to experiment with sort of the no estimates movement to see if we could get the cards generally approximately the same size, the ones that are actually moving through the backlog during sprints. We could just use card flow as opposed to estimation flow. And in practice, that has turned out to be a sufficient level of estimation. I think it may relate a little bit to the fact that we have a lot of experienced developers who are relatively good at breaking their work into things that are approximately the same size. But even with the occasional like very large or very small outlier, they are close enough together that we have pretty accurate estimates of what we're doing, how much work we can do. Obviously, we're checking in regularly, so we're using this data to guide our actions. These are not like ironclad guaranteed these cards are going to get through. But
cool, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. I think this is useful for other game developers, for tech companies. I mean, even marketing teams that are using more of a, let's say, a Kanban flow can use these things.
Yeah, glad I can help.
Thank you.
Thank you.